Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the worship committee for inviting me to speak. They asked me to talk about the sixth principle, and also, since it's Women's History Month, to include that. But I want to shout out first to my grandson back there, Jacob. I think he was one of the things that drew him today, other than I really wanted him to see me other than a Nana, was Mr. Dencher, his favorite teacher. I think that one got the smile out of him. So in conjunction with the Unitarians' principle, sixth principle, liberty and justice, peace, we will be addressing the history of female physicians and clergy. I did want to mention that the worship committee is listed on the back of your bulletin, so be sure and look at your bulletin, because I think Deb goes to great trouble in getting that all together. So do several others that are involved. Women were told that they were too emotional for medicine and too intellectual for ministry. That's what they were told. Historically, women faced significant barriers to enter into the medical education, as medical schools were not accessible to them. Positions within the clergy were predominantly held by men, and today we recognize this as social injustice, and it still exists. The emergence of women in medicine and ministry was not merely a social process, it was an evolution. The history of women in medicine is marked by numerous pioneers who have paved the way for today's physicians. The first woman admitted to medical school in the United States set a significant precedent for advancing opportunities for women in the field. Elizabeth Blackwell became the first female physician in the United States on January 23, 1849. Her being admitted to medical school is quite an interesting story. The administration turned it over, the decision, to the students, who of course were all male, and they thought it'd be a great joke because she'd never last. Well, she was the first in her class. Elizabeth Blackwell practiced Unitarianism at one point in time also. She established a friendship with Florence Nightingale, and together, 25 years later, they founded a women's medical college and infirmary, along with Blackwell's sister in 1874 in London. Dr. Blackwell's lectures and personal example inspired other women to take up medicine as well. Today, women comprise approximately 37% of female practitioners in the United States. Since 1901, only 12 women since Madame Curie earned the Nobel Peace Prize. Madame Curie earned 2 in 1903 for radioactivity and in 1911 for isolating pure radium. In the past December 25, Dr. Mary Brocknow accepted the Nobel Peace Prize for the significance. She really made a big deal out of, in her acceptance speech, acknowledging the achievement of women. Anyone know what she discovered? You're all raising your hand, right? She identified the gene that controls regulatory T cells, a previously unknown class of immune cells that act as security guards to keep harmful immune responses in check with regards to autoimmune diseases and cancer. Many women changed the prevailing story of the times. Dr. Emily Cady was a force to be reckoned with. She was both a minister and a teacher, and I'll discuss her in a little bit. In 1863, the first ordained woman was Reverend Olympia Brown. Unitarianism began in the late 16th century during the Protestant Revolution in Poland, Transylvania, England, and Wales, and developed in America in the late 19th century. She became a Universalist minister in 1863, as I said, before these traditions unified in the 20th century. Reverend Brown was first ordained in the lineage that would later become Unitarian Universalism. She was a pioneering educator and minister who became the first American woman to be ordained with full denominational authority. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts from Antioch College in 1860 and later graduated from St. Lawrence University Theological School, and they were quite concerned about any negative publicity that would happen because of her ordination. Nevertheless, Reverend Brown was also a prominent advocate for women's suffrage, having met Susan B. Anthony in 1866 and became a leading figure in the women's rights movement. In summary, Reverend Olympia Brown was the first woman ordained with full denominational authority in America Association. The Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association encourage that ministers have completed formal education and practical training and have been welcomed into preliminary fellowship of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. That is the Unitarian Universalist Association. Today, authority rests with individual congregations, not a higher ecclesiastical body. Another ordained unity minister was Celia C. Burley. She was ordained in 1871, and she too was a trailblazing Unitarian minister, a prolific writer, a key organizer in women's clubs and suffrage movements. She's remembered for breaking gender barriers in American religious life. I wanted to state briefly the Unitarian principles. They are not statements of belief. They are invitations to participate in the evolution of a more just and loving world. Today, almost 60% of women are ministers in the Unitarian belief system. They comprise 7 principles: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equality, compassion in human relationships, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in congregations. 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. 5, the right of consciousness and the use of democratic process within the congregations and in society at large. And the one that I'm speaking on today is peace, liberty, and justice for all. And 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence which we are a part. Again, having made significant strides in gender inclusivity, women today make up 50 to 60% of female ministers in the Unitarian Church. Now, you have to remember that in the 1800s, women who felt called to ministry and medicine were told very clearly, this is not your place. In 1866, Mary Baker Eddy, founder of the Christian Science School of Thought, described God as an impersonal, infinite mind or divine principle, and saw Jesus as a human who embodied spiritual principles. She adhered to subscribing to a form of philosophical idealism, believing that reality is solely spiritual and the material world an illusion. Her action in setting strict dogma limited any further advancement in knowledge. Now, following her came Emma Curtis Hopkins. She graduated from Oberlin College in 1866. She wrote many books, including Class Lessons of 1888. I have all of her books. I really liked this woman. She was considered the mother of New Thought and was a key role who advanced women's rights. She was under Mary Baker Eddy's tutelage for several years, breaking away with the advancement of medical knowledge. Now, at that time, ether was discovered, along with other medical advances. She played a key role in organizing the New Thought movement and was recognized as a theologian, author, mystic, healer, and educator who ordained individuals of all genders. She followed Eddy's lead in calling God both Father and Mother, but differed in her set of doctrines. She was considered a teacher of teachers, and at one time in Chicago, she had 50,000 students. And today, neuroscience confirms many of her teachings. Many of Emma Curtis Hopkins' students established and founded their own churches, and they rose in prominence in the New Thought movement. In 1871, Dr. Cady and many others pioneers, including unity, divine science, science and mind, etc., followed. In 1866, Myrtle and Charles Fillmore attended a New Thought class held by Dr. E.B. Weeks, who was a minister and New Thought lecturer in the 1880s. This paralleled in many ways with Emma Curtis Hopkins' beliefs and the neuroscience of today. Myrtle Fillmore later recovered from a chronic tuberculosis and credited her healing to prayer and the techniques learned in Weeks' classes. Charles began to heal from a childhood accident, and a development that he too attached to following this philosophy. Unity has core spiritual principles, tenets actually. God is everywhere equally present. Human beings are innately good because they are an expression of spirit. Our thoughts are creative power. Thoughts held in mind produce in the outer after their kind. And it's not enough to understand spiritual teachings, but one must walk the walk. Now in 1906, we're moving on here, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore became the first Unity ministers, starting a prayer-based ministry and purchasing a farm in Lee Summit. They established the Unity School of Christianity in Kansas City, Missouri. Now on a personal note, I attended Unity School of Christianity, was licensed and ordained through the Association of Unity Churches. The acceptance process was quite involved. Of all the people that applied, 100 were selected and sent amazing applications that took a lot. Even my husband had to write a letter supporting me if I got accepted. Well, 25 were invited, 50 were invited, 25 were selected, and I got to be selected, and I was so excited. But then I realized, well, everybody was so excited to go home and tell all of their friends that they were accepted. I got to go home and tell a very Catholic mother that her mother was going to be becoming a minister and going back and forth to Kansas City to ministerial school. And the other thing was one of my sons bet me a set of tires that I wouldn't get in. Well, I didn't have to buy those tires. I was the first female, as far as I know, in Quincy, serving a church that had not had a minister for a number of years. And at that time, Quincy had 2 ministerial associations. Due to prevailing gender bias at the time, women, as well as individuals from Jewish, Afro-American, and LGBTQ communities, were not allowed. Back to Dr. Katie, who was both a physician and a spiritual teacher. In the era when science and religion were opposite, she believed that they were partners in the same quest for truth. Dr. Katie was one of the first women to earn a medical degree in 1884 and was also linked to the New Thought movement. Traditional churches required ordination and licensing, and since women were excluded from seminaries and religious schools, they established their own seminaries. Medical schools routinely rejected female applicants. Many churches refused to ordain women. Women were expected to nurture and support, but not lead, diagnose, or teach. After becoming a physician, Dr. Katie began exploring the emerging New Thought movement, a traditional spiritual tradition that emphasized the power of mind, prayer, and consciousness in healing. She stood firmly in both worlds, medicine and ministry. In April 2025, women made up 39% of practicing physicians in the United States. Approximately 20% of clergy in the United States are women, and this proportion is steadily increasing. Women still face representational gaps, particularly in senior pastoral roles and in specific denominations. In 1956, the first woman in the United Methodist Church was Maud Jansen, and today 32% of female ministers are in the Methodist Church. In 1889 saw the first American bishop. She was Barbara Harris in the Episcopal Church. 40% of ordained clergy are women, and if you include deacons, it comprises 60%. In 1970, Elizabeth Pez was the first female Lutheran pastor. Currently, 40% of women are Lutheran pastors. Disciples of Christ have led efforts to promote female clergy since 2000. In 2025, female clergy made up 5.8% of Baptist church leaders. However, Southern Baptists oppose ordination for women. However, some churches have ordained despite the consequences. Unitarian Universalism and New Thought share similar in rejecting traditional dogma and have deep theological roots, especially Unitarians. The inherent goodness of people, reason, and ethics are shared core values. Clergy and physicians are tireless women who live the sixth principle by creating peace through healing, advancing liberty through education, and justice through inclusion. They did not wait for permission to evolve. Their evolution pulled society forward. The blending of science and spirit saw mind and body as an integral system. Healing is relational, not mechanical. Compassion as a form of intelligence. What was once dismissed as women's intuition is now validated by neuroscience and holistic care. Humanity is responding to these sources by developing new ways of seeing events unfold. Each one here today contributes to consciousness individually and collectively. So in closing, reflecting on our culture, instead of blaming cultural apathy or fear, we might examine our own fear, anger, and frustration, as each of us shapes the mindset of our community and the world. As individuals and as a group, we each impact the human experience, each and every one of us. You make a difference through your thinking, in thoughts, words, and emotional responses, creating energy, much like a pebble that's dropped in the pond, and the ripples go forth. So it is with the energy that we provide. We all look for a place to fit in, to contribute, and to have meaning, to quiet the discontent in our souls with bravery in life to keep on keeping on and discovering joy in each day. Yes, there is still inequality, and yet our growth does evolve. Every generation models and learns from the previous one. We are creatures of habit. Look at where you're sitting today. We are creatures of habit. And there is a quiet pattern in history. History is passed down. I am reminded of a story. Easter Sunday is next week. And a husband asked his wife why she was cutting off the side of a ham for roasting. And she said, "Oh, I don't know. My mom always did that." So he asked her mom, and she said, "Well, my mom always did that." And he said, "But why did she do that?" And she said, "Oh, so that it would fit in the pan." History is passed down. The development of awareness and a shift in perspective is an ongoing process of learning and transformation, like the experiences of those that have gone before us. We honor our predecessors and foremothers with the courage as we uphold the sixth principle, working together toward peace, liberty, and justice for all. And so it is, and so we let it be.